Dr. Strauss, let me begin by reading an excerpt from the Da Vinci Code. Jesus' establishment as the Son of God was officially proposed and voted on by the Council of Nicaea. That would have been in the year 325. Until that moment in history, Jesus was viewed by his followers as a mortal prophet, a great and powerful man, but a man nonetheless, a mortal. By officially endorsing Jesus as the Son of God, Constantine turned Jesus into a deity. Many scholars claim that the early church literally stole Jesus from his original followers, hijacking his human message, shrouding it in an impenetrable cloak of divinity, and using it to expand their own power. How much of that is truth and how much of it is fiction?
That's an extraordinary statement of revisionist history. And in fact, when I was reading the book, when I was reading the Da Vinci Code, I was quite enjoying it. It's quite a murder mystery and fascinating, and each chapter leaves you hanging and leads to the next. I got to that chapter, and suddenly it spoiled the book for me. Because what you have in that chapter is you have two supposed experts, historical experts, and all of a sudden they're spouting absolute historical nonsense that any historian could tell you is pure nonsense, pure gibberish.
So this was not the first time in 325 AD that Jesus was declared deity?
Absolutely not. The Council of Nicaea was extraordinarily important, 325. The conversion of Constantine, the first emperor to become a Christian, was enormously important for the church. It freed the church now no longer to have to suffer persecution and so forth. But the idea that Constantine and the Council of Nicaea made Jesus divine, made him into a deity from a mere mortal prophet, is ridiculous. The church had been declaring Jesus deity for centuries, 250 years. In fact, to determine when the church is speaking about Jesus' deity, simply go to the New Testament. 250 years earlier, we get statement after statement that, in fact, affirms Jesus' deity in the New Testament documents themselves.
Well, maybe Dan Brown would challenge you on that, because he also makes the assertion that what Constantine did is he took the Gospels, like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that talked about the deity of Jesus, and he embellished those, and then he took the Gospels that said that Jesus was merely a human being, and he had those destroyed. So could it be that there have been destroyed Gospels or missing Gospels that make it clear that, no, that other thing is all a mistake, Jesus is just a human being?
That claim completely convolutes history. Dan Brown suggests that there were 80 or so Gospels swirling around, and that the church just chose those particular Gospels which they viewed as authoritative, which they viewed as supporting their particular perspective. That just runs absolutely contrary to what we know about the historical facts. The four Gospels from the New Testament, what we call the canonical Gospels, the Gospels that were part of the Bible, that are part of the Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are the only historical documents that really can be with certainty shown to be first-century documents. That is, really documents that arose within the first and second generation of Jesus' followers. The claim that these other Gospels were competing with those until this particular date just simply doesn't support that. It's very interesting because even the early church fathers, the church historians, the second generation after the apostles, when they're talking about the false teachers, the heretics, the Gnostics that Dan Brown talks about, and they refer to their teachings and their writings, they don't tend to refer to other Gospels. What they say is they say these false teachers are taking the Gospels, the four Gospels, and distorting them. So what is that telling you? That's telling you that the church as a whole recognized that these documents were the authentic Gospels, and even these false teachers, these Gnostics, these other groups that Dan Brown refers to, recognized these four Gospels as the church's Gospels, the authoritative accounts. And so they took those Gospels and would edit them, would change them, and then they would then begin to write their own versions of the text, their own Gospels.
Well, let's talk about what the Gospels then, if these are the most reliable documents we have. Does Jesus, in these Gospels, does he come out and make the claim that he is God?
Absolutely. Jesus makes the claim that he is God. In John's Gospel, chapter 8, Jesus is in a dialogue with his opponents, his Jewish opponents, and they claim Abraham as their father. And Jesus responds and he says, "Before Abraham was, I am." kind of a strange response, an interesting response. And what is obvious from that response is Jesus is in fact referring to Exodus chapter 3 in the Old Testament, where God reveals himself to Moses as the I am. It's a claim to deity. It's a claim to pre-existence. It's a claim to be the creator of the universe. So here Jesus is, and he identifies himself as the I am, the God of the Old Testament. Now, we know that's what he meant because the immediate response from the authorities is they pick up stones to stone him to death. They recognize that he's making a claim to be God and respond, accusing him of blasphemy and attempting to kill him. John chapter 10, Jesus says, I and the Father are one. Again, identify his identity with deity, his identity with God the Father. John chapter 14, Philip comes to Jesus and he says, Jesus, show us the Father. And Jesus responds, have you been with me so long and you don't yet get it? He says, he who has seen me, the one who has seen me, has seen the Father. And so again, Jesus says, I am the one who reveals the Father.